Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. It all started with a silly mistake, one that I never imagined would spiral into the chaos that it did. I, Laura, had been happily married to Ethan, my high school sweetheart, for 8 blissful years. Ethan, with his understanding nature and gentle smile, was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Our life, though not extravagant, was filled with love, small adventures, and the comfort of each other's company. That evening, I was at a colleague's farewell party. The music was loud, the lights dim, and the air filled with the bittersweet sentiment of goodbye. After a few drinks, the atmosphere became hazier, the laughter louder. That's when Mark, a new guy at work, started chatting me up. He was funny, no doubt, and I, swayed by the alcohol and the ambience, laughed a bit too heartily at his jokes. It was all friendly and innocent, or so I thought. I didn't realize when the friendly pats turned into lingering touches. I should have stepped back, should have thought of Ethan, but I didn't. The party ended, and the mistake happened. A kiss, an act so simple yet so devastating. I pulled away almost immediately, the realization of what I'd done hitting me like a ton of bricks. I went home that night, my heart pounding, my mind a blur. Ethan was there, waiting up for me. I looked into his trusting eyes and felt a wave of nausea. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. I decided to sleep on it, to think about how to explain this lapse in judgment. I lay in bed that night, my mind racing. The image of Mark's fleeting kiss haunted me. It was just a moment, a lapse, but the weight of it felt crushing. Ethan's face, so loving and trusting, flashed in my mind, intensifying my guilt. Sleep was a stranger to me that night. The morning light did nothing to ease my turmoil. Ethan's routine was as it always had been. A gentle kiss on my forehead, his soft smile, the smell of coffee brewing. But today, everything felt tainted. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring my coffee aimlessly, watching him read the newspaper. Everything okay? Ethan's voice broke through my haze. His eyes met mine, filled with concern. Yeah, just didn't sleep well, I lied, forcing a smile. I watched him leave for work, his usual goodbye wave sending a pang of pain through me. I spent the day in a daze, the hours ticking by with the heavy beat of my heart. My decision to confess gnawed at me, but the fear of losing him, of seeing his love turn to disgust, kept the words trapped inside. That evening, I heard his car pull into the driveway, and my heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. I rehearsed the words in my head, each sentence laced with regret and apologies. Ethan walked in, looking tired, but he smiled when he saw me, that same warm smile that had always felt like home. I felt a knot in my throat. How could I shatter this? Hey, we need to talk, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything okay? Ethan's voice was filled with the same love and concern as always, but I detected a hint of something else, apprehension, maybe. I took a deep breath. Last night, at the party, something happened. Something I'm so ashamed of. My voice trembled, tears threatening to spill. Ethan's face changed, his brows furrowing slightly. He sat down, silent, urging me to continue. It was a mistake, a stupid, thoughtless mistake. Mark, he kissed me. I didn't expect it, didn't want it. I pushed him away, but I should have stopped it before, should have never let it get to that point. I'm so sorry, Ethan. The words tumbled out, messy and filled with desperation. For a moment, there was only silence. A painful, stretching silence. Ethan's face was unreadable. His eyes, once warm, now held a storm of emotions I couldn't decipher. Why are you telling me this? His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it I'd never heard before. Because I can't lie to you. Because what we have. I can't bear the thought of losing it over something so meaningless, I replied, my voice breaking. Ethan stood up, pacing the room. He ran his hands through his hair, a sign I knew meant he was deeply troubled. I need some time to think, he said finally, his voice strained. I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. I watched him walk away, his footsteps echoing in the silent house, each step like a chisel to my heart. The night was long and lonely. I replayed the conversation, the look on Ethan's face, over and over. The reality of what I'd done, the possibility of losing him, settled in my stomach like a lead weight. The next morning, Ethan was gone before I awoke. His side of the bed was untouched. The absence of his goodbye routine felt like a scream in the quiet morning. The day passed in a blur, the house echoing with the ghost of our normal life. But Ethan's words, "I need some time to think," replayed in my mind, a haunting refrain to the symphony of my regret. As the sun set, I waited, watching the driveway, praying for his return, for a chance to fix this. But the house remained empty, the silence unbroken. With each passing hour, my fear grew. Had my confession, my once silly mistake, cost me everything? The story of that night, of the kiss that never should have happened, began to feel like a turning point, one from which there was no return. And as I sat alone in the growing darkness, I realized that the consequences of that moment were only just beginning to unfold. Morning came with a heavy heart. Ethan left early for work, and I was left alone with my guilt. I decided to talk to him that evening, to confess everything. But when I reached home, I found Ethan sitting silently in the living room. He wasn't alone. His phone was on the table, the screen lit up with a message from Mark, detailing last night's mistake. Ethan had always been good friends with my colleagues. The look on Ethan's face broke me. It was a mix of hurt, betrayal, and disbelief. I tried to explain, to tell him it meant nothing, that it was a mistake. But how do you take back a kiss? How do you erase betrayal? Ethan didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, and something in his gaze shifted, something that scared me. That night, Ethan slept in the guest room. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. Days passed with minimal conversation. His silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I missed his voice, his touch, his presence in our bed. But I waited, hoped he'd come around. Days blurred into each other, each one quieter than the last. Ethan's side of the bed remained untouched, his presence in the house reduced to a silent shadow. The brief moments we crossed paths were filled with unspoken words and averted gazes. His usual warm, comforting aura had turned cold, distant. I tried breaking the silence numerous times. One evening, as he sat in the living room, staring blankly at a book, I gathered my courage. "Ethan," I started, my voice trembling, "please, can we talk? I can't stand this silence. It's killing me." He looked up, his eyes weary and dull. "What's there to talk about, Laura? You've said enough. Please, I miss you. I miss us." Tears streaked down my face. I'd do anything to undo that night. He closed the book, a deep sigh escaping him. "I don't know if I can, Laura. I look at you, and all I can see is that betrayal. How do you expect me to just get over that?" His words stung, but they were nothing compared to the pain in his eyes. "I know I've hurt you, more than I can ever fix. But isn't our love, our years together worth a second chance?" Ethan didn't reply immediately. He stood up and walked over to the window, gazing out into the darkening sky. "Love isn't just about the good times, Laura. It's also about trust, respect. You broke both. And I just don't know if I can find my way back from that." The conversation ended there, with him walking away, leaving me alone with my despair. The following days saw him retreat further into his shell, his interactions with me becoming even more mechanical. One rainy night, a week after our conversation, I woke up to find Ethan's side of the bed cold yet again. I wrapped myself in a robe and went downstairs, hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd be willing to talk. But what I found shattered me. The living room lights were on, Ethan's laptop open on the table. On the screen, an email was half composed, addressed to a divorce attorney. My heart sank. The reality of losing him, the finality of it, hit me like a freight train. I must have made a sound, a sob or a gasp, because Ethan suddenly appeared at the door, his expression one of surprise and regret. "Laura, you weren't supposed to see that." "But I did," I whispered, my voice choked. "Is this what you want? A divorce?" Ethan walked in, his steps hesitant. He didn't answer immediately. "I don't know what I want, Laura. But I do know I can't live like this, in this limbo, wondering what's real and what's not. I've always been real, Ethan. My mistake, as huge as it was, doesn't change every moment we've shared, every dream we've built." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration and confusion. "I wish it were that simple, Laura. I wish I could just separate that one night from everything else. But every time I look at you, it's there, looming over us." His words cut deep, but I understood. This wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about whether the love we had was strong enough to overcome this. "Maybe we need some space," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe. You need time to figure things out, away from me." Ethan looked at me, and in that glance, I saw a flicker of the man I loved, torn and battling his own heart. "Maybe you're right," he said softly. The decision to give each other space felt like a mutual surrender, an acknowledgement that some hurts were too deep to heal in the presence of the one who inflicted them. We agreed that he would stay with a friend for a while. As I watched him pack a few belongings, a sense of surreal numbness enveloped me. This was really happening. My Ethan, my love, my best friend, was walking away because of a mistake I couldn't undo. After he left, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat alone, the sound of the rain outside mirroring the storm in my heart. The crushing silence had given way to a devastating reality, the possibility of a future without Ethan. And as each drop fell, it echoed the ticking of a clock, marking the passage of time and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. As days turned into weeks, Ethan's silence turned into absence. He left early, came back late, and barely acknowledged me. My apologies, my attempts at conversation were met with nods or shrugs. Then one day, I returned from work to find his part of the wardrobe empty. His books, his guitar, his watch all gone. He didn't leave a note. He didn't say goodbye. He just disappeared from my life. Calls went unanswered. Texts were left unread. Friends said he needed time, that he was staying with a buddy. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Ethan had ghosted me, leaving me in a world of regret and solitude. The first week without Ethan was like living in a nightmare. Every morning, I woke up to the crushing reality of his absence. His ghost seemed to linger in every corner of our home, in every mundane activity that we once shared. The silence was no longer just crushing, it was haunting. I kept reaching out to him, text at first, then voicemails, each one a mix of apologies, pleas, and love. But as days turned into a week, and then two, his silence became deafening. He didn't respond to any of my messages. It was as if he'd vanished from my life, leaving me grappling with shadows of memories. One day, desperate for any kind of connection, I drove past his friend's place, where he was staying. I just sat there in my car, watching the front door like some lovesick teenager. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe just a glimpse of him, something to assure me that the man I loved still existed. But there was nothing. His friend's place was like a fortress, impenetrable and cold. Feeling foolish and despondent, I drove back home, only to find a surprise waiting for me. My sister, Mel, was on my doorstep, her face etched with worry and resolve. "Laura, we need to talk," she said, stepping inside before I could protest. Mel and I had always been close, but since Ethan's departure, I'd shut everyone out, including her. She settled on the sofa, her eyes searching mine. "I know you're hurting, but this isn't you. You're letting this consume you. Where's the fighter I know? The sister who taught me to never give up?" I looked away, feeling a lump in my throat. "I don't know if there's anything left to fight for, Mel. He won't talk to me, won't see me. It's like I don't exist to him anymore." "That's not true," she countered firmly. "But you need to give him space. And more importantly, you need to give yourself space. You can't just wait for him to decide. You need to live, Laura, for yourself." Her words struck a chord. Somewhere inside, a spark of my old self flickered to life. Mel was right. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, haunted by Ethan's ghost. The next few days, I tried to take Mel's advice. I went back to work, met with friends, even started a small gardening project. Anything to fill the void in silence. But despite my efforts, Ethan's absence was a constant ache, a reminder of the love I was fighting to save. Then, about 3 weeks after Ethan left, I finally received a text from him. My heart leaped with a mix of hope and fear as I opened it. "Can we meet?" "Saturday, at the park where we first met. Noon." That was it. No words of love, no promises, just a time and a place. But it was something, a chance. Saturday came, and with it, a turmoil of emotions. I arrived at the park early, my heart pounding in my chest. As noon approached, I saw him walking towards me. He looked different, tired, thinner, but still Ethan. We sat on a bench, the same one where we'd shared our first kiss. The air was heavy with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. "How are you?" It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of weeks of silence and pain. "I've been better," I replied, my voice shaky. "You?" He sighed, looking away. Confused, hurt. "I've had a lot of time to think." We talked, or rather, we took turns speaking, tiptoeing around the giant elephant of my betrayal. He spoke of his feelings, his doubts about our relationship, and how the incident with Mark had shattered something fundamental between us. Listening to him, feeling the distance that had grown, I realized how much of a crossroads we were at. The man sitting beside me was both the Ethan I loved and a stranger, scarred by my mistake. The conversation didn't lead to any decisions or resolutions. When it was time to part, Ethan stood up, his expression unreadable. "I'm not ready to come back, Laura. I don't know if I ever will be. I just need more time." The words were a blow, yet there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes that gave me a sliver of hope. We hugged, a brief, awkward embrace, before he turned and walked away. I watched him go, the familiar ache in my heart mixed with a newfound resolve. Ethan's ghosting, his silence, was his way of coping, but for me, it was a call to action, a realization that I had to fight for our love, but also prepare for the possibility of a future on my own. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the potential for more pain, but I knew I had to walk it, one step at a time. I spent months in that empty house, hoping each day he'd walk through that door, giving me a chance to explain, to make things right. But he never did. I realized that my one mistake didn't just break our marriage, it broke him, the trust, the bond we took years to build. I started seeing a therapist, talking out my guilt and grief. The more I spoke about it, the more I understood the depth of my error. Ethan's silence wasn't just out of spite, it was his way of coping, of dealing with the hurt I had caused. I had to accept that some mistakes cannot be undone, some words cannot be unsaid, and some actions have irrevocable consequences. In the weeks that followed our meeting, I threw myself into life with a fervor I hadn't felt in years. It was a whirlwind of activity, work projects, late-night outings with friends, weekend volunteer work. Anything and everything to keep the gnawing loneliness at bay. Yet, each night as I lay in bed, the silence returned, louder than ever, filled with Ethan's absence. One particularly challenging day, I found myself at our favorite coffee shop. The barista, who knew us by name, gave me a sympathetic smile as she handed me my order. Settling into a corner, I let the familiar sounds and smells envelop me, a bittersweet reminder of the countless mornings Ethan and I had spent here, lost in conversation and laughter. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed. It was Mel, checking in as she had done tirelessly over the past weeks. "Hey, sis. How's it going?" Her voice was a blend of concern and cheer. "I'm hanging in there," I replied, forcing a smile into my words. "Keeping busy, you know? Laura, remember, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. You don't always have to put up a brave front." I sighed, a lump forming in my throat. "Sometimes, I just feel so lost, Mel. Like I'm in this endless maze, trying to find my way back to something. Anything." Her voice softened. "You're finding your way back to yourself, Laura. And maybe that's what you need right now. Ethan or no Ethan." We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. I sat there, staring at my now cold coffee, lost in thought. Mel's words echoed in my mind, stirring something deep within. Suddenly, I was startled out of my reverie by a familiar voice. "Laura? Is that you?" I looked up to see Mark, of all people, standing there with a cautious smile. My heart sank. The last person I wanted to encounter was the man who played a central role in my current predicament. "Mark, hi." My voice was flat, void of warmth. "I've been meaning to reach out," he began awkwardly. "I heard about you and Ethan." "I'm so sorry, Laura. That night was a huge mistake, and I never meant for things to go so far." His apology, sincere as it might have been, felt like salt in an open wound. Anger bubbled up inside me, but alongside it, something else, a stark realization. "Mark, that night was a mistake. But it wasn't all on you. I made a choice, however mindless it might have been. And now, I'm dealing with the consequences." He looked taken aback, perhaps expecting me to lash out or break down. But I felt neither of those impulses. In that moment, facing Mark, I felt a sense of clarity. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Mark. But as for me, I need to focus on fixing my life. Whether Ethan is in that future or not, I have to rediscover who I am, apart from him, apart from this mess." Mark nodded, a look of respect crossing his features. "I really do wish you all the best, Laura. You deserve happiness." As he walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, it was simply acceptance of the situation, of my role in it, and of the long journey of healing ahead. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to rediscover myself. The pieces of my identity that I had lost in my marriage, and my obsession with Ethan's forgiveness, started to come back together. I rekindled old hobbies, rediscovered my love for painting, and even began to write a blog about my journey through heartache and healing. Ethan remained a ghost in my life, his silence a constant ache. But it no longer defined me. I started to see glimmers of hope, moments where I could picture a future bright with possibilities, with or without him. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I worked on a canvas in my makeshift home studio, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, and my breath caught. It was Ethan. Heart pounding, I answered, my voice a cautious mix of hope and apprehension. "Hello?" "Laura." His voice was hesitant, a whisper across the line. I've been thinking a lot. Can we talk? In person? My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts and emotions colliding. Yes, we can talk. When? Tomorrow? The same park? Noon? Okay, I said, a sense of déjà vu washing over me. I'll be there. We ended the call, and I sat there, staring at the unfinished painting before me. The swirls of color and emotion on the canvas mirrored the turmoil in my heart. Tomorrow could change everything. But whatever the outcome, I knew I was facing it as a stronger, more complete version of myself. The realization that I had grown through this ordeal filled me with a cautious optimism. As the sun set, casting a golden glow through my window, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Tomorrow was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face whatever it brought, with or without Ethan by my side. It's been a year now since Ethan left. I haven't heard from him, and slowly, I've learned to live with the pain. I moved out of our house, started a new job, and began to rebuild a life, alone but stronger. The guilt still visits me some nights, but I've learned to embrace it, to let it be a reminder rather than a punishment. In this new chapter of my life, I've realized the importance of being true to oneself and the ones we love. I made a mistake, a grave one, and though I can't go back in time to correct it, I can move forward, being more mindful, more appreciative of the moments and the people in my life. Sometimes, I still find myself looking at my phone, half expecting a message from Ethan, an indication that he might still care. But deep down, I know some goodbyes are forever, and some mistakes, though unintentional, have lasting effects. My story with Ethan ended not with a bang, but with a ghosting silence, leaving behind lessons learned and a heart forever mindful of love's fragile nature. The morning of the meeting, the sun rose like a giant, fiery promise, painting the sky in shades of hope and trepidation. I dressed with care, choosing an outfit that made me feel both powerful and vulnerable. As I drove to the park, memories played like an old movie in my mind. The laughter, the tears, the silences filled with unspoken love. Arriving at the park, I found Ethan already there, waiting. He stood with his back to me, gazing out over the lake. His posture was tense, yet there was a certain ease to him that hadn't been there before. "Hey," I said softly, approaching him. He turned, and I saw the changes in him. There were new lines around his eyes, but there was also a softness, a hint of the old Ethan peeking through the weariness. "Laura." His voice was like a melody I thought I'd forgotten, but it all came rushing back. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then, as if guided by some unspoken understanding, we began to walk, slowly, along the lakeside path. "I've missed this," he began, his eyes not meeting mine. "Missed you. But I needed the space to think, to understand if I could. If we could." I listened, letting his words wash over me. It was a confession, a window into his soul. "I've missed you too, Ethan. More than I can say. But I also realized something important. I can't be defined by this mistake, or by your forgiveness. I'm more than that. We're more than that." He stopped walking and faced me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Laura, I know you didn't mean for things to happen the way they did. And I've been dealing with my own demons. But seeing you now, I realize how much I've been living in the shadow of that night." His admission struck a chord in me. We had both been ghosts, haunting the ruins of our past. "Ethan, I love you. That has never changed. But I also love myself enough to know that I can't wait forever. We either move forward, together, building something new, or we let go completely." There was a long, heart-stopping pause as he processed my words. Then, with a depth of emotion that made my heart swell, he reached for my hand. "I don't want to let go, Laura. I can't promise that it'll be easy, or that the pain will disappear overnight. But I want to try. If you're willing, I want to start a new chapter with you, a new beginning." Tears brimmed in my eyes, not of sorrow, but of hope. "I want that too, Ethan. More than anything." As we resumed our walk, hand in hand, the path ahead seemed filled with light and shadows, complexities and possibilities. We talked about therapy, about honesty, about rebuilding trust step by delicate step. It was the start of a journey, fraught with challenges, but rich with potential. Later, as we sat on our bench, the very one where we'd shared our first kiss, I realized that this was not an ending, nor was it a simple continuation of what once was. It was a new beginning, a testament to love's resilience, to the strength found in vulnerability and truth. Our conversation flowed into the evening, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, I felt a sense of completeness. The story of Laura and Ethan, with its twists and turns, its highs and lows, was still being written. There were no neat endings, no fairy tale conclusions. Just life, in all its messy, beautiful complexity. We stood up, ready to leave, our hands still clasped tightly. As we walked away from the bench, from the lake, from the ghosts of our past, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger, wiser, and forever changed by the journey. And in that knowledge, there was a profound, exhilarating sense of peace. The path ahead was unclear, winding through unknown territories, but it was our path, filled with new dreams, new challenges, and an enduring love, ready to embrace whatever lay beyond the horizon.